And, we spend a lot of time talking about memory, right? One of the interesting findings is that being up in space for a long period of time actually causes cells in your hippocampus to die. And your hippocampus is
Wow.
the organ in your brain that's responsible for memory.
Hello, everyone. This is the Space Cafe podcast, and I'm Marcus. So, does space, zero gravity, have any effect on the human brain, the human mind, the way we think, the way our brain works? Yes, recent findings from cognitive neuroscience show there is some major effect. To the better or to the worse, this will be part and the main focus of our discussion over the next 70 to 80 minutes on the Space Cafe podcast. My guest today is Dr. Heather Collins, cognitive neuroscientist, and she works at the forefront of all those things. She knows quite a bit about the human brain, the most recent findings, how our brain works, and I did take the liberty, for my own sake, and I believe also for your sake, to try to find out how we can trick our brains into becoming the ones we've always wanted. And I asked Dr. Heather Collins about her favorite mind and brain hacks. So I suggest you stay put wherever you are. This is a fantastic ride, a very beneficial ride to each and every one. So without further ado, let's go. Welcome Dr. Heather Collins to the Space Cafe podcast. Heather, I was going to watch another episode of Black Mirror tonight, but then I reminded myself that you at some point said in the same time, I could build a stronger and more efficient brain. So you're giving me a very hard time to make a decision now. Either watch Black Mirror or build a stronger, more efficient brain. So what should I do?
Well, if Black Mirror makes you think critically about possibilities and science fiction and everything that it presents, then that's an exercise in critical thinking, which is also good for your work.
It is.
So I would argue you can do both simultaneously.
Before we move into space, let's talk about a little bit of the background that led you on that trajectory.
Yeah, before we head to space, we can definitely stay grounded here on Earth. And I'm a cognitive neuroscientist, so my expertise is in how the brain learns, remembers, and thinks about information and people. And that means on a daily basis, I'm involved with some research day to day, but I'm also a keynote speaker. So I take these findings from cognitive neuroscience and bring them to associations, corporations, businesses, other organizations, and show them how they can actually use strategies from brain science that are based in research, based in how the brain works, to improve their outcomes. And so my passion is about helping people understand how they can better use their brains to achieve their goals in life. And that's one of the reasons I love talking at South by Southwest. You never know, as you know, since you've been 4 times, you never know who's going to show up at any presentation at South by Southwest. So it was a pleasure to be able to talk to people with very different backgrounds, from software engineers to other professional speakers, people who are space enthusiasts, to podcasters like yourself.
Fantastic. This is getting me really excited because I feel like I can learn quite a bit today about how to even improve my own mind and to get better at things. So before we get into the weeds, how much do we know today about the human mind? Because there's so many anecdotes and stories and misunderstandings maybe about the brain, the human brain, the misunderstanding that we only use 10% of it all. So can you debunk all those myths and maybe let us a little bit into your world? How much do we know, does science know about the human brain?
Yeah, we can definitely debunk myths. So I can guarantee you are using more than 10% of your brain. I guarantee you that. There's also this myth that some people are left-brained versus right-brained, so more creative on one side versus more analytical on another. And that's a complete myth as well. In fact, there's a
Interesting.
really high association between the brain networks that are used for music and interpreting music and listening music, and also the brain networks that are used for engaging in computational mathematics.
Mm,
So those are really, really highly correlated in your brain. And your brain also doesn't really split itself in half. Your left hemisphere really does talk with your right hemisphere. And so, although these two hemispheres appear to be separate, there's a bundle of fibers in the middle. So you can think of them as like electrical wires that
mm,
cross and span both sides so that your left hemisphere is regularly communicating with your right and back and forth. And we actually know a great deal about the human brain. There's still very, very much to learn. There's still lots of unknowns. But as far as the basics of human behavior and human cognition and emotion, we know a great deal. And in fact, a lot of this research, that is, this scientific investigation into the human mind and how it works, begins, hundreds of years ago with philosophers and with
mm,
people who were heading in the direction of science before science was actually a field. Science itself is definitely much newer than philosophy. Philosophy's been around for probably since the existence of humankind. We've been wondering about the big questions in life. Who am I? Why am I here? All of those
mm,
questions. The very first psychological research laboratory investigating the human mind is relatively new compared to that. It was established in 1879 by a psychologist named Wilhelm Wundt. And he might actually be the first person who
mhm,
calls himself a research psychologist. He's evidence based, and it was
mm,
established in Leipzig, Germany. Germany was incredibly crucial in the late 1800s, early 1900s in propelling the science of the human mind forward. And so we
mm,
have a lot of really important phenomena based on these German scientists. A lot of brain parts that we know about are based on findings observed by German scientists. And so we actually do know a lot going back to 1879. We know several things that are really important. We know, my favorite, how memory works. So, how you
mm.
can better remember things, why you don't remember some things, and what happens when you just can't recall something that you want to recall. We know a lot about how humans interact with one another, and we pick up on these very, very subtle cues. So, for example, if I'm smiling at you, your brain is able to detect that right now I'm giving you a genuine smile. And part of
Mm,
that
mm,
is because of little eye wrinkles right here at the side of your eye. It's what's
mm,
known as a Duchenne smile. And when we smile authentically,
mhm.
we get these little wrinkles on the sides of our eyes. And that's the brain's ability to see those and recognize that and say, oh, I can trust that person because that person is genuinely responding to what I'm saying. Whereas if somebody smiles at you like, really really big
Right.
smile with without those eye wrinkles there. I
Yeah.
don't know if you've ever had that experience where you say like, something's off.
Mm.
Something doesn't seem quite
Maybe
right.
not. Mhm.
Maybe not, exactly. And that maybe not feeling, that's your brain saying, hold up, I know that is not an authentic, genuine smile. And maybe I need to be a little more cautious, a little more reserved about sharing information with this person or trusting this person. And that sort of situation comes way back from the days in which we were cave people. And it was, can I trust this person to be part of my tribe? Or should I hold off a little? Maybe this person's going to take off with all of my food supplies in the middle of the night and steal from me, and then I can't trust them. So we know a great deal about how the human brain works, how people interact with one another, and the very, very small, subtle things that your brain can pick up on without you even really being aware of it.
It got a bazillion questions on my mind right now. You mentioned we know how we remember things and how we can improve remembering things. Is there a certain methodology towards doing so? Because I mean, like this is hands-on, useful information you can give here. What can I do to remember things better?
Oh, yeah. This is something that comes up every single time I talk about the brain, regardless of who the audience is or where I am.
Yeah.
This always comes up because most people feel like, "Oh, I want to remember things better. I want to be able to have a better memory."
Mm,
Even if they don't feel like they have a bad memory, I think it's a
mm,
genuine common feeling that we all have as humans, that we know that feeling when we can't remember something and it doesn't feel good. And we would like to reduce the
mm,
frequency of those kinds of feelings. We would like a better memory.
mm.
And do you ever forget your keys, Marcus, or wonder where you put them?
Sometimes, or very often, it's those routine things that I keep forgetting because maybe I'm doing them mindlessly because it's routine.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the
Yeah,
great thing
yeah,
about
yeah.
routines is routines allow us to engage in a certain set of behaviors or activities while our brain is thinking about something else and putting effort towards
Mm,
something else.
something
So
else. Mm,
routines can be really helpful and really important in freeing up mental space to think about important things.
mm,
You don't really need to pay attention to everything happening in every little
mm,
moment of your life. You would go crazy thinking about all of that information. The downside of routines is because it is something that you have automated and your brain has automated this behavior, that means you are thinking about something else. And that means you're not paying attention to what you're doing. And I hear a lot
mm.
of people say, "Oh, I forget where I put my keys. Can you help me remember that?" And the funny thing is, that's not a memory problem. It's an attention problem.
Mm,
That is,
mm,
you walk through the door, you put your keys down somewhere, but you're not thinking about where you put your keys. You're thinking about maybe the cats are meowing at you, the dog is barking, the kids want something. You're thinking about what you're going to cook for dinner, or maybe you're thinking about what you have to do for the rest of the evening, or what the next episode of Black Mirror is that you're going to watch tonight. You're
right.
excited about that. And so when you're excited and thinking about all of these other activities, you're just not paying attention to where you put your keys. And attention is the gateway to memory. Attention is how you take information out here into the world and actually get it into your brain.
So it's the distraction
Yeah.
is the issue, the problem, and this is we're living in a distractive world these
Yeah.
days. We have all our gadgets and smartphones and kids and everything producing a, a cacophony of noise in our brains, and I think this is maybe one of the greatest issues these days. Too much information, and we're not focused enough to be able to remember the essential
That's
things.
a great way to put it, a cacophony of noise in
Mm,
your brain. And if if you're not able to pay attention to something, it can never make it in. And if it doesn't make it into your brain, it
mm,
can't become a memory. So if it never makes it in, you can never pull it out when you need to. You can never remember it when you need to. Now the good thing is there's a
fantastic.
really easy solution to the key problem. And because you don't really need to pay attention to where you put your keys. You just want to know where they are so you can pick them up when you need them. And that is, take your automated routine and edit it so that it includes one specific place you always put your keys. Maybe it's a little shelf,
Mm,
maybe it's a hook by the door, maybe it's a little bowl or a basket on the kitchen counter or somewhere nearby. You want it to be close to the door when you walk in. And you want to always put your keys there every single time. Now
mm,
you'll have to think about
mhm,
it and really pay attention
mhm,
the first few times. But after that,
mm,
it'll become an automated routine, just like many other automated routines.
mm.
But this time, it's a good automated routine that will help you.
I do quite a bit of trail running, and while trail running, I listen to podcasts, and now and then, quite often, my brain connects certain movements, certain places, very particular places with words I'm listening to, completely non-correlated, but I have a very visual memory when I listen to a specific word in a podcast episode where exactly my foot was placed. So this is very strange. And I do not even know. This is not even a moment when I'm stumbling or when something dramatic happens, but my brain, for whatever reason, connects now and then places movements with content I'm listening to for whatever reason.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating phenomenon of the brain that you bring up, and it's a really cool finding that basically that neurons that fire together wire together, so to speak. And that's a
Mm,
really simple way of saying your brain works based on meaning and association. So anything that's meaningful to
mm-hmm,
you gets linked, and things that happen at the same time, even if they're not related, get linked. So
mm,
this is something that's quite common. So for example, I've had a similar experience. Sometimes at night, I will
mm-hmm,
while I'm watching Black Mirror or some other show,
mm-hmm,
I also will be making some jewelry, which is a hobby of mine to decrease stress.
mm-hmm,
And when I go to pick up my jewelry, maybe after a week uh, of not making it, I'll remember exactly what I was
mm-hmm.
watching while I was making that. Even though the jewelry and the TV show have
Exactly.
nothing to do with one
Yes.
another, it's just like
Yes.
your
Yes.
motion of your running or where you were while you were running has nothing to do with
Mm-hmm,
podcast. But because they happened at the same
mm,
time, your brain connects those neurons. And now they're connected and they're going to play together. And when we say they play together, that means when you think about one, it's going to fire off electrochemical signals to the other, and you're going to think about the other. So we can
fascinating.
actually use this to our advantage. And there's something that's known as context dependent memory. And because our brain is paying attention to all these things at the same time and sometimes linking them, you can use that to your advantage. So let's say you're trying to learn some information and maybe you're trying to memorize the words to your new favorite song because you want to be able to sing along with it.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so when you're out on your run, you're listening to your favorite song. Well, you do
mm-hmm.
that exact same thing. Go on that exact same run, listen to your favorite song 4 or 5 times. And after that, you could take your headphones out and go on that run, and you'd be able to recall that song without having your headphones in. Because being on that
Wow.
same path you were on triggers those neurons in your brain to fire off and say, hey, when I was here the past few times, I was listening to this song. And the song will sort of play in your
Mm.
head automatically without your consent. So make sure it's a good song and something you really want to remember,
Exactly.
because that's a surefire way of building a memory of that song.
Mm,
Conversely, let's say you're sitting in your office and you play that song. Well, because you played that song, your brain says, oh, this song is now associated with this place I was running a few times while listening to this song. So
mhm.
even though you're sitting in your office, you'll have a lot of visual memory about where you were and what those runs were like in the environment while you're sitting in your office listening to that song.
I love that because right after our recording, I will put that to the test. I'll start running like right after
Yeah.
with one of my favorite songs, and I'll check back with you in a couple of days and let you know how it went.
Absolutely. As a good scientist, I'm always collecting data. So I would love to hear exactly how this went. And for
Great,
any of your listeners,
great.
please try this out and let Marcus and I know how it went. And it doesn't just hold true for music and running, it could be any two things. And this actually could come in really handy for anyone who's a student out there, university
Hmm.
students, high school student, anyone who's trying to learn anything. If you sit in one spot and do your learning in that one place, you'll have stronger recall of your learning every time you go back to that place.
So we should find the perfect learning spot and stick to that
Yeah.
place. Is okay. Okay, good. And turn off our smartphones
And turn off your
and remove distraction.
absolutely.
Good.
And the distraction has a huge, huge cost on memory because, again, the gateway to your memory is attention. And if you're constantly being distracted, then that means this thing you're trying to focus on and pay attention to is not making it into your brain. It's going to stay
Wow.
wherever it is, and you're not going to learn it. You're not going to remember it. It's never going to get in there.
Is it true that our brains need 13 minutes to get focused, and when you're distracted, you're starting the counter all over again. So is that
Well,
true?
there is some research and some data to show. So as you point out, distractions are incredibly, really harmful and detrimental to your ability to achieve your goals. It really
Mm,
hurts your brain. And there are some data and some research out there to suggest that when you're interrupted by something, maybe it's your smartphone, maybe it's your cat jumping on your
mm,
desk meowing at you, it really takes
mm,
about 15 minutes for you to get back on track. So there's a really,
mm,
really big cost to being distracted. And as far as whether it takes 15 minutes or not to focus, so that's something that
mm,
actually varies greatly amongst individuals.
mm,
So if you're an individual who is not neurotypical, so maybe you have ADD, then certainly you're going to have a more challenging
mm,
time getting focused right away. If you're an
mm,
individual who, let's say, is an expert at meditating, well, being an expert at meditating
mm,
really enhances your brain's ability to narrow in and focus very, very quickly. So maybe instead of
mm,
15 minutes, it might take you 2 or 3 minutes. And the other thing is it's also very task dependent. So if you are working on something that you know very, very well, that you're an expert in, then you're going to be able to zone in and focus right away because your brain has done that thing a lot of times and it says, "Oh, I know. I've done this, 100 times. I know how to slip into this."
mm,
But if you're doing something new, it's going to take more time because your brain doesn't have any
mm,
experience slipping into that zone of focus.
mm,
Another
mm,
interesting variable is actually your emotion. So, how do you
mm,
feel about the thing you're doing? Is it something you're really excited about? If that's the case, you'll be able to focus very, very quickly. If it's something you don't want to do, or something you're dragging your feet on, or something you just don't feel good about, it's going to take longer for you to focus. And that's simply your brain
mm,
telling you that it hasn't bought in yet. So you need to create a little bit of buy-in
mm,
for your brain to be able to focus. And maybe
mm,
that means you talk to yourself and you say, uh, for me recently, it was taxes. I had to do my taxes. It's not a fun experience.
mm,
It's not a pleasant experience, but it has
mm,
to be done.
mm,
So rather than focusing on how much you dislike something, try to find a positive. So for me, that was, I don't want to do my taxes. It's really hard to focus on. It's very tedious. But
mm,
when I'm done, I'm going to be able to submit it and get a refund. And so the quicker I
mm.
submit my taxes, the quicker I get my money back.
It's all about finding the right narrative, the storytelling for the
Oh,
mind.
yeah. Your brain is really big into storytelling. And if you have not
Mm,
cultivated buy-in with your brain, nope, it's not going to work.
mm,
And so it might even be just giving yourself a little treat or a little reward. So maybe it's after I do my taxes or after you write your next podcast, you're going to go out and get an ice cream cone. Yeah, maybe it's something like that.
great.
And the
Mm,
really, really
mm,
important thing of that is when you take time to celebrate small wins or to celebrate
mm,
some small achievement or goal, you're actually tapping into your
mm,
brain's reinforcement network. So that
mm,
little ice cream cone actually is really, really
mm.
important because it tells your brain,
Powerful.
"Hey, I did this and it was a good experience because I got this thing I really, really like. I got this ice cream cone." And that means next time there's something challenging I have to do, I'm going to feel better about doing it because I know that getting through it means I get a little treat, I get a little reward, and that makes it not so bad. And so this is a really small way to tap in and actually start shifting your mindset and shifting your brain's energy to realize I can actually take on these goals that I wasn't so sure about before.
Mm,
And
mm.
this is a way to neurobiologically reinforce that idea and create buy in with your brain to help you conquer those difficult tasks.
Fantastic. Let's um let's move upward. Let's go into
Let's go to
space.
space. I'm ready. Are you ready?
Would you go, by the way, if someone asked?
So
Katy Perry was just,
Yeah, it depends.
um,
So,
yeah,
first of all, somebody would have to pay for me to go. It's quite expensive.
yes.
I would definitely go on a suborbital flight to the Kármán line like they just did. So those flights, for
Mm,
listeners who aren't familiar, this is the one that Blue Origin's just launched with Katy Perry and Gayle King and some 4 other women. And the entire flight time from launch until landing is about 11 minutes. So you launch, you
mm,
take off, and you go to the Kármán line. And the Kármán line is essentially the line that separates Earth's atmosphere from what we would call space. And it's
mm,
62 miles above the Earth. And the really significant thing about the Kármán line is once you go up there, that's where you can become weightless. So that's where you experience
mm,
not quite zero gravity, but we call it microgravity, little bits of gravity, but not
mm,
enough to keep you down. You're actually weightless. So would I do that?
mhm,
Yes, I would, absolutely. And I think that actually, with my background as a cognitive neuroscientist, thinking about everything the brain goes through, you know, I
mm,
for anybody listening out there who's you works for Blue Origins or some other company, Virgin Galactic or anything else doing flights,
mhm.
I would love to actually conduct some research studies on this. Because one of
Good.
the fascinating things, Marcus, is that we don't have research studies based on just lay people going up into space. And that that's starting to become an interest because we're realizing that space tourism is here. And it's
Mm,
important to know not just how superhuman astronauts are affected by
mm,
space, but how everyday people, you and I, who are not
yeah.
superhuman astronauts, may be affected by
Yes.
space travel. So that's something that's
Mm.
that's new, that's really happening. Now, if you're asking me if I want to go to Mars, I'm not quite there yet.
Maybe you wait for the first cohort to come back and tell you how it was.
Wait for the first cohort, but also I really appreciate all of the things we have on Earth that are blue and
On
green
Earth, yes.
and
Yes.
not just dirt
Yeah.
and blackness
The
everywhere.
hostile environment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so I don't know if
exactly.
the hostile
Exactly.
environment is very appealing to me, but
Yeah.
definitely want to scan the brains of people who go up to Mars and come back. That's where I want to
Yes.
be. I want to be on the ground with the brain scanner, scanning their
Yeah.
brains and giving them questionnaires and cognitive tests to find out what it was like and how it may have changed them.
Does space change the human mind? How much do we know about
It
that?
does. It does. We have so
Mm,
I've been on several publications with NASA where we've looked at astronauts' brains before and after space flight. Uh, ESA, European Space Agency, been on a collaborative paper with them. They're collecting data. Roscosmos are collecting data on the
mm,
cosmonauts.
mhm,
JAXA, the Japanese Space Agency, is collecting a lot of data. So we do have dozens of research scientists collecting data all over the world on this. And it's pretty definitive that space does affect the brain. And the interesting thing is, it depends on a lot of factors. So one of the big factors is how long are you up there? So we back in the days when the U.S. was using the space shuttle program, we
mm,
have some data on astronauts that would go up to the International Space Station for maybe 2 weeks and come down.
mm,
And we did not see a lot of brain changes with that. There might be
mm,
some minor things that happen and they're probably temporary.
mm,
So I would anticipate anybody who's going up on one of these 62-mile flights up to the Kármán line and they come back down and it's 11 minutes, they might experience some temporary shifts in the brain,
mm,
but they're probably going to be recovered shortly after returning. Where we see more dramatic changes are for astronauts who are up on the International Space Station, let's say, for 6 months or longer. So typical
mm,
long duration mission, as we call it, might be 6 months to 1 year. And
yeah, mm,
I was going to say, what we see then is a really interesting collection of changes. So one of them is that there are vision changes. So your eyes have the biggest nerve, the thickest nerve in your body is behind your eyes, and that's your optic nerve. And that goes back, crosses over hemispheres, and
Mm-hmm.
lands back here in your occipital lobe so that vision comes in through your eyes and your brain processes it back here. Well, those fibers, the optic nerve fibers in space, tend to get stretched out and crunched down. And therefore, there's
Wow.
vision impairment.
Why is that?
So, funny thing, our brains have developed to appreciate gravity here on Earth. And so our brains sit in our skull very, very nicely, and they're surrounded by cerebral spinal fluid. So they're kind of
Mm-hmm.
sitting in there, but there's a little bit of fluid shift. So to allow for a little bit of insurance, let's say in case you smack your head
Mm-hmm.
against something, your head's not necessarily going to smack at the upside of
Mm-hmm.
your skull. You have that fluid as a buffer. Well, when we're in
Mm-hmm.
a microgravitational environment, again, little tiny bit of gravity, but you're weightless. Instead of your brain being situated in your skull nicely where it belongs, it's now floating in a way that's abnormal for it.
Mm-hmm.
And actually,
Mm-hmm.
it causes a change in those fluids in your brain, and they shift upward. So if we were to look at the very, very inside of your brain, so if we were just to slice your skull open, pop it off, and look down on
Mm-hmm.
the center of your
Mm-hmm.
brain, you would see these little cavities. And almost, if you're looking down, it would almost
Mm-hmm.
look like a little butterfly kind of shape. And those are called ventricles.
Mm-hmm.
And those are also filled with cerebral spinal fluid. And when there's a change in gravity, it causes an increase in pressure in your brain called intracranial pressure. So those ventricles fill up with more fluid, and that puts more pressure pushing out your
Mm-hmm.
brain. And it actually puts a lot of pressure shifting upward with your brain. And so that change in pressure really causes things like your optic nerve to kind of get crunched from that pressure. And it causes other changes as well. So the top part of your brain actually like smacks up
Mm-hmm.
against your skull, gets a little bit squished there. And your brain, as a result of getting squished in different parts, just doesn't work as well. And there are a lot of challenges associated with that.
Hmm. So is this bad news, or do we know yet
Well,
what the effects of all that? Yeah.
this is bad news. And we spend a lot of time talking about memory, right? One of the interesting findings is that being up in space for a long period of time actually causes cells in your hippocampus to die. And your hippocampus is
Wow.
the organ in your brain that's responsible for memory. So we're going to see memory
Mm-hmm.
impairment in space too.
Loss.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And we don't have a lot of data on how persistent these changes are when astronauts return.
Mm-hmm.
NASA is they don't have a typical protocol where they scan with MRI astronauts. Let's say a year later or
Mm-hmm.
6 months later, they get scanned pretty quickly after they return to Earth,
Mm-hmm.
and that's about it. Mm, The Russian space agency Roscosmos, they actually have some data on the cosmonauts and what happens with their brain changes after they return. And the finding is that there are some changes that appear to linger. Now, are these changes enough to cause a disturbance and really affect the way someone lives here on Earth? Well, we're not 100% sure yet. Maybe you do have more memory
Mm-hmm.
glitches. Maybe it is a little more challenging for you to recall information when you want. So it could be that that's the case. We know that generally speaking, while you're in space, the kind of changes we see in the brain might be associated with like a rapid aging of the brain. That kind of a
Mm-hmm.
situation. So it's
Mm-hmm.
not great. A lot of those do return back to baseline to some
Mm-hmm.
extent. Might take a little while, but some of them might be more
Mm-hmm.
permanent. And we just don't know exactly which of those changes are more permanent.
Very interesting. So we should speed up our artificial gravity strategies, because if we bring back gravity in space, then we could mitigate those issues. Is that right?
Absolutely.
or is it not so simple?
No, honestly, if you're asking me what the biggest barrier to us going to Mars is, I would say artificial gravity. Do we need artificial gravity to go to
Mm,
Mars? No, not necessarily. But you and I were just talking about brain changes that happen in the International Space Station for 6 months, a year. Well, the moon is farther out than the International Space Station, and
mm,
we're talking about now setting up moon bases. So we're talking about people being on the moon for a good deal of time. And to get to Mars, well, that might be 6 or 8 months commute time, so
mm.
to speak,
Just to get
each
there.
way. Yeah, just to get there. So if it's
Yeah.
a minimum of 6 months to get there and 6 months to get back, that's 1 year travel time. And so how
Mm,
I don't like spending I'm not gonna fly to come visit you probably for a weekend, right? Because that would be a lot
mm,
of time on a
mm,
plane for just a little time to get to see you. Not that you wouldn't be worth it. You're
mm,
awesome.
mhm,
But we
mm,
like to make sure that if we're gonna spend a lot of time traveling, we actually get to enjoy the destination or
mm,
or at least do what we need to do on that destination. So it could be work, could be travel, could be whatever. And so I could see somebody spending a year on Mars or 2 years on Mars or three
mm,
years on Mars. And so that amount of, could we make it work? Well, certainly there's some way that human survival can work without artificial gravity. But what are the effects on the brain? What are people going to be
mm.
blind by that time because the visual
Wow.
impairment are so devastating? Are people going to have completely diminished memory systems by that time? Because there's been so much time with intracranial pressure due to the microgravity that we start seeing some really,
Mm,
really dramatic effects on the brain. And it's not just memory, it's not just vision. There's some of these brain regions are involved in thinking, reasoning,
mhm,
decision making. And I assume you've seen a space movie or two in your time.
mm.
And
Absolutely.
and I'm sure your listeners have all seen space films. We all love space.
Mhm.
And the one guarantee about a space film is that something's going to go horribly wrong, right?
Yes.
Terrible and
Yes.
awful. And when something is terrible,
Someone is going crazy.
yeah,
Someone aboard the ship is going crazy. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Or something happens with the ship and or a big asteroid's
Yeah.
coming at you. And
Yeah.
so some
Yes.
crisis is going to happen. And when there's a crisis that happens, boy, you need to be a sharp thinker. You need to be
Yes.
excellent at decision making. You need to be able to pivot and switch your thoughts and strategies very, very quickly. You need to engage in rapid problem solving that's going to work. And if these areas of your brain are diminished, what happens when you're 90% of the way to Mars and an asteroid's coming for you? We don't know. We
Mm,
just don't know. So I think your point about
mm,
artificial gravity, yeah, that's going to play a huge role
mm,
in and not just making sure we can get there, but making sure that we can get there in a way that preserves our brain health and preserves our ability to do all of these really, really
mm.
advanced human functions that we need to do.
Super interesting. To be honest, I'm not really enjoying what you're telling me here because I would want to see some humans setting boots on the ground on Mars in the very near future. But to be super honest, you're the second person now um, suggesting we reconsider our plans because the first person we already had a couple of episodes ago was the director of or one of the managers of the Cassini mission. And when I asked him about our Mars plans and that we're getting ready to set boots on the ground before 2030, he was just laughing out loud and said, we do not have a solution in place, a technical solution in place against radiation, it's against space radiation. And now you're telling me we have no solution in place against memory or brain deterioration, brain function loss, and whatnot. So maybe going to Mars needs major reconsideration because it's not just about the spacecraft, it's not just about the vehicles, it's also about how we as humans are encapsulated in those vehicles. Is that a safe place or is it a very dangerous place. And still, it seems we have not done our homework in order to be able to live out there. We may be able to build those rockets, those spaceships, and everything looks that we're going to have them anytime soon. But this is just one side of the coin, a coin of many sides, I think.
Yeah, this is certainly a more than a two-sided coin, as you point out. And it's
Yeah.
interesting. 10 years ago, maybe, I was at a NASA research
Mm,
conference. And
mm,
I spoke to several people who were on the ground, boots on the ground, working at NASA with astronauts and things like that. And they said that at that time, it was thought a mission to Mars, might be a one-way mission. That might be a one-way trip. You might be able
mm,
to get there, but you're not going to be able to get back. And
mm, mm.
pretty much every astronaut they spoke to said, I don't care, I would go anyway.
Wow.
So there's still some aspect of space really being there for exploration. Just like,
Yes.
hundreds of years ago, people would set sail on a ship trying to go exploring, looking for the Americas or looking for something else. And they didn't know if they were ever going to come back.
Or scale the tallest peaks.
Yes.
Same,
Yes.
same is true for
Scale
the
tallest peak. Yeah. They
mountains.
don't
Yeah.
know if they're going to come back, but they want to do it
Mm,
anyway because they're explorers.
mm,
So I think there's
mm,
still a big push for people who are explorers. They care less about the
mm,
consequences of it happening than they do about actually being able to go there and get there. And that holds true, maybe not for professional explorers only, but also adventurers,
mm,
people with a lot of resources who just want to do it to say they did it. And they certainly can make that
mm,
choice regardless of how safe that choice is.
mm,
And just like
mm,
people who want to go explore the deepest depths of the ocean and they don't know if they're coming,
mm,
but they still do it. So I think those people will always be out there. And to be honest,
mm,
Marcus, those people might be the first ones who end up going to Mars. They might say, I don't care. I'm going no matter
mm.
what, regardless of how safe it is.
I'm sorry, but I think this is only possible for privately funded space missions, because if we're talking about publicly funded space missions, we still need to be able to make ethical decisions, and this is an ethical decision to be had here. And if we're not super clear about what we're doing, and if the chances of survival are 50-50, I think we cannot risk any kind of mission. What do you say?
I think you and I are on the same page. We wouldn't risk that mission, but we're
Yeah.
also not the people making decisions. And you have to hope the people making those decisions are making them in an ethical way. So
Mm,
I can't say for sure if that's the case or not, or if it will be when the
mm,
time comes, but we hope
mm,
so. I think
mm,
we're at the stage that regardless of who is first, I do believe it will be a private
mm,
mission. Uh, Maybe
mm,
with or without the support of a public agency, whether that's ESA
mm,
or NASA or
mm,
JAXA or Roscosmos.
mm,
And those are certainly the big players. So with or without their support, I do believe it will be a private mission. Who
mm,
makes it there first? They're just
mm,
they're able to move more rapidly. They're able to get money together faster to make this kind of thing happen. And it will be, I hope they're honest with the risks about the people who choose to go.
mm,
But ultimately, if the
mm,
opportunity exists and people would like to take advantage of that opportunity, it's up to them to make that decision. Now, I think when we're talking about living on Mars or staying on Mars for any amount of time, or really the moon base too, because
mm,
we're not that far away
mm,
from hotels on the moon. And essentially, you could go and
mm,
spend a 2-week vacation there. So we're not that far away from
mm,
that. But we would want to make
mm,
sure that it'd be great for radiation measures, countermeasures to be
mm,
available. That's certainly a big
mm,
risk. And
mm,
we would want artificial gravity there. And maybe
mm,
if you're going to be a space tourist who goes to stay at a hotel on the moon for 2 weeks, you definitely want to experience weightlessness. That's probably one of the reasons you're going
mm,
there. But for example, we've heard
mm,
from a lot of professional astronauts that sleeping in microgravity is not necessarily a pleasant experience. So maybe you have artificial
Yes.
gravity and sleeping
Mm,
quarters, and you actually have a bed
mm,
to sleep in and can feel gravity at that amount of time to give your brain a little bit of a respite from those zero gravity or
mm,
microgravity experiences.
mm.
So I do think amongst
I
it's
saw,
important to have artificial gravity and other safety measures in place.
I saw a replica of the Columbus module of the ISS, and in one of the lockers, I saw a replica of sleeping bags, like hanging sleeping bags. I think this is the experience that they're having. It's like bat style
Yes,
sleeping experience.
exactly like bat style. It's essentially a mummy type sleeping bag if you're familiar with camping equipment. A mummy
Yes,
type sleeping bag kind of
yes,
velcroed to the wall. And
yes,
interestingly, what I
exactly.
see every time I see pictures of people sleeping on the space station, your hands are just kind of floating out like this, which I think is pretty fascinating.
Yes.
So maybe when we
Um,
appreciate
other
artificial gravity is during our sleeping hours.
exactly for some extra pay, maybe. Um, are there any beneficial observations science has made so far when it comes to the human brain and space?
Well, there are certainly a lot of breakthroughs regarding science breakthroughs. And let me put
Mm,
out there that although there might be some health challenges associated with space, we have gained a lot of good information from it. So, one of the
mm,
benefits about a microgravitational environment is we're able to do science experiments we can't do here. So, testing out new cancer drugs,
yeah.
they even grow lettuce and some vegetables in the
Mm,
International
mm,
Space Station, and certainly that's going to be critical for Mars. Can you imagine going to Mars and only
mm,
eating, meals in a packet?
mm. Canned
Canned
food?
food, right? Frozen frozen dehydrated food for 3 years? No, we're gonna need to grow fresh
Yeah,
vegetables and
totally.
fresh food. So, there are some really
Yes.
amazing advancements being done. And I will say that I think one of the most fascinating effects of space on maybe not the brain specifically, because this hasn't been tested with MRI, but at least the reported experience is the overview effect. So if you talk
Mm.
to
Frank White.
Yeah, if you talk to nearly every astronaut, but also every space tourist who's gone up, even on these 11-minute up and down to the Kármán line
Mm,
experiences, the nearly universal experience is the overview effect, in which people say, "Wow, I saw blackness everywhere, and then I turned and I looked at the earth, and it was blue and it was green, and I felt one with it, and it
mm,
seemed like such a
mm,
a place that's so unique and so welcoming and so warm and yet so fragile, and I feel like I'm a part of it now, and we need to protect it." And so that effect is really fascinating, and I actually wonder if as more people go into space, as space tourism really blossoms and blooms, are we going to have a big shift on how we see the earth as a society? So when we have not just one or two, but dozens, and which we have now, and hundreds and thousands of people coming back with this overview effect, is that going to lead to some policy changes in how we treat the earth
mm,
and our
mm,
environment? Is it going to lead to other positive social changes in how we treat each other across different borders? Because one of the parts of the overview fact is people say there were no borders. The only borders were land and sea. And so we
mm,
feel like we're not just
mm.
one with our earth and our planet, but one with everybody else who inhabits that planet, our fellow humankind.
Could be could be truly transformative for societies if we sent our leaders on such missions on maybe just an 11-minute Karman line experience. Our leaders will, I think, make different decisions after that.
I think that would be an absolutely
Yeah.
awesome experience for them. And like you said, transformative. If we get people to go up there who
Yes.
can make a big change and make a big difference and do it swiftly, uh, yeah, I think this is, maybe one of the most beneficial aspects of these very, very brief space travel experiences is that I posted on LinkedIn after the last Blue Origins launch. If you think about what people talk about before they go up, and there's the anticipation and excitement versus what they talk about when they come back, it is transformative. And it's transformative in 10 minutes and 21 seconds. And can we
Mm,
think of
mm,
anything that could
exactly.
possibly be more transformative in 10 minutes and 21 seconds?
Mm,
So
mm,
you can find something that can change you and change your perspective in that brief amount of time.
mm,
And if that could be this
mm.
space experience for our leaders and change makers, that could be huge for society and for our planet.
That could be a little complicated to get like all the security details covered, but that could be a huge business case for a space company to only ship the leaders into space and back again, of course, but who will focus on just that. That could be truly, truly amazing. You know why? I don't know why I'm thinking, why I'm drawing this analogy now, but I hear from leaders in India time and again that in India you get on a spiritual journey also, whoever you are. And if you're the president, if you're the prime minister, whoever you are, you have a spiritual journey in your pocket from earlier in your life. So for example, I was blown away when I came across a book called Transcendence by Abdul Kalam. And Abdul Kalam used to be India's prime minister um, 2 generations ago, I think. And he comes from the space industry and then gets appointed to become the prime minister. And it was truly interesting to hear his life story when he discussed with his guru. I His name escapes me. Um, what his role in life and his role in life as a prime minister should be for the country. So he took that vantage point, that elevated vantage point in his mind and went like, let's go on a journey for a couple of months now. Let's go on a trip and find out what it is that I'm supposed to do for my country. And this is truly humbling, in my opinion, to have this approach when entering such a job description. And I think now maybe in the Western world we're not capable to do those spiritual things because there's so much baggage attached to it. But maybe going into space and experiencing an overview effect has the same spiritual dimension that a 6-month long journey through the Himalayas has. Maybe it's all not making sense at all what I'm babbling here, but I just had that analogy and I think that nicely fits our
I
discussion.
think that completely makes sense, and it's quite a profound thought. And e- whatever insights that self-reflective kind of experience could have massive effects, as you point out. And the interesting thing is, I think there's also a way to do this at a much lower cost for individuals who would like to have that profound experience. But you might not have the budget for a ticket on a shuttle
Mm,
or a rocket or anything like that. There are some companies now that realize the value of this overview effect and of this experience, and they really provide this experience via virtual reality. So they have the video
mm,
footage of leaving Earth
mm,
and hovering in
mm,
space and returning to Earth. And you can do it at a fraction of the
mm,
cost. Now, we would imagine that
mm,
this is probably not as transcendent of an experience as actually being up there.
mm.
However, it certainly would provide you with some insight and allow you to gain
Yes.
some perspective that you didn't have prior to that experience and at a much lower
Mm,
cost. And I think as this becomes more readily available and more popular, this is certainly another way for people at all points in society to maybe be able to have a little taste of what this experience is and gain a little bit of information.
And slightly more sustainable. Slightly more sustainable when it
Completely
comes
sustainable,
to
more environmentally
yeah.
friendly, less
Yeah.
expensive, more readily available. All of those good characteristics also.
How long do we need to understand if it makes sense to spend more time in space for our human brains, or how long should we wait before we venture for longer time? Because we're making baby steps, I think, at the moment when it comes to understanding how dangerous or not dangerous that is to our human minds
Well,
and
I
brains.
think that it's going forward, and the pace at which it's going forward is based on the technology available. And I think that's the driving
Mm,
force, regardless of how dangerous it
mm,
is. And I think that's just
mm,
because it's one of these things that humans have decided we're going to Mars. This is happening. This is happening no matter what, no matter how safe it is. And that happens in some aspects of society. So, for example,
mm,
here with American football, there has been a
mm.
really, really large impact of traumatic brain injury from football players. And the NFL, the National Football
Yes.
League, has
Hmm.
acknowledged this. And they have put some money into research and trying to make better helmets and things of that nature. But it's the idea of we know that, very large men are going to be colliding into each other, and that's just part of the sport.
Mm,
We're going to do it no matter what, but we'll try to make it a little
mm,
safer as we go along. And I think it's very much the same thing. So
mm,
to me, I think the big things are going to be the engineers and the physicists and all this are and
mm,
technologists and software people are making this happen at a very rapid pace. And it's going to be on the human end.
mm,
What can we do to make this as safe and sustainable as possible
mm,
when the time comes? So I don't think the safety part is going to hold
mm,
us back. I think it's going to be what can we do to make it as safe
mm,
as possible? And I think there are already some good
mm,
ideas that are happening. So some of the big ones are, as you talked about, artificial gravity. There are companies right now working on artificial
mm,
gravity, and that'll certainly make a massive impact. Also,
mhm,
AI bots are going to be hugely important. And that is if we have some AI entity on board with people, those AI entities
mm,
can evaluate humans for psychological fitness, for mental health, but also give cognitive tests and vision tests.
mm,
And
mhm,
so
mhm,
even if we can't fix everything, we would at least be able to identify the levels of impairment and understand what that means
mhm,
for human performance in space. I think
mhm,
also the
mhm,
cool thing is if we do see, for example, a really, really big factor in just the travel to Mars is going to be depression. So all of these
mm,
factors
mhm,
involved in traveling to Mars are factors that could trigger depression. So not having regular
mhm,
human contact with your friends and family as you normally do, not having
mhm,
outdoor nature, which has been shown by research to be very, very beneficial to the human mind and very beneficial in combating and preventing depression from happening. But if you're just staring into black space for 6 months while you're going to Mars, you don't get that. You don't get that feedback. Lack of
mm,
vitamin D because
mhm,
you're going farther away from the sun and you don't have that vitamin D coming from natural sunlight. So countermeasures might include vitamin D supplements, but also with AI, uh, therapy sessions to help treat depression
mhm,
and other challenges that come along with mental health, and video calls with friends and family on a regular
mm,
basis to help combat things of that nature. So there
mm,
are a lot of really not perfect solutions, but countermeasures to help with those challenges of humans being in a space or a
mm,
prolonged environment that we can do. And even on the side, it
mm,
comes back to one of the first things you and I talked about. Well, what can I do to make my memory better? Well, there are memory strategies. So we
mm,
could teach people
mm,
memory and cognition improvement strategies here on Earth just to give them those skills You'll boost it while we're here on Earth so that you're at a higher level of cognitive performance before you go into space and things become challenging. But also,
Mm.
if you do find through AI or doing an assessment or through your own experience, like you're on this rocket and you're going to Mars and you're in month 3, and maybe you think, gosh, it doesn't feel right. I can't remember things. Then okay, when I was on Earth, I practiced these strategies, and these strategies helped improve my memory. Now I have those strategies and I know them. I'm going to take those strategies and use them while I'm in space and try to help my memory too.
Mm.
So there are a lot of countermeasures available. So we're going when it's time technologically, and we just will be doing our best to make sure humans can be the best that they can be with what we have.
Thrive and thrive in space. I think it could be truly interesting to now take the next step and think how our physicality, our brains will adapt to the environment over generations and evolve out there in space. That could be truly interesting. Is science looking into something like that? This may be a little speculative,
Yeah, I
of
would say
course,
right now
but
that's
yeah,
definitely in the realm of science future, not science present, but it's
yeah,
also
yeah,
not science
mm,
fiction. So it's not something
yeah,
that's totally unbelievable. It's something that
mm,
when the time comes, I think we will be ready to examine that. As you said, that'll be a
mm,
very long research study over generations and
yeah,
decades.
mm,
But I do
mm,
think that that's a question on most people's minds who think about space travel and what that means for
mm,
humans. And it
mm,
will be really interesting, generationally, or even let's say you're on the moon or Mars for decades. How does your
mm,
brain change and adapt? How does your body change and
mm,
adapt? We know that
mm,
your muscles in your body and your skeletal system,
mm,
those are also really benefited by gravity. And we know that despite the fact
mm,
that astronauts work out for 2 hours a day on the International Space Station, they still come
mm,
back and have incredible muscle atrophy and weakness. And
mm, loss.
and
Mm,
most of the
mm,
time they can't walk on their own without some assistance
mm,
after they return to Earth.
mm,
And certainly if you were on Mars for 3 years and then came back, what is that gonna look like?
mm. Heather, let's come back to Earth again. What are your five favorite mind hacks you'd like to share as a scientist
Oh,
for our audience,
my f
for me to immediately make use of?
yeah, okay, so one of them is, uh, I do a little experiment. So as a good research scientist, I always have experiments in my back pocket. And when I give keynotes and talk to companies and organizations, one of the things I like to do is not just tell them about how their brain can improve, but really show them and have them do experiments, and so they can see what it feels like right away. And a question I ask
Hmm.
is, would you like to improve your memory by 20 to 40% in 5 minutes? And so would you?
Let's go right
Yeah,
now.
yeah, really
Yes,
simple.
now.
Don't multitask. So there's a huge cost of multitasking.
Mm-hmm,
And if you just
mm-hmm,
pay attention to one thing at a time, you'll improve your memory by 20 to 40% right away. Maybe even more. Maybe even more. So
wow.
that's number 1. That's really easy. Number 2 is that meaning is really, really important to your brain. Your brain is organized and based off of
Mm,
meaning. So have you ever thought,
mm-hmm,
you've maybe been somewhere, been at some event or something, and somebody asks you, "Oh, how was that?" How was that orchestra performance, or how was that play you went to, or that
mm,
movie you saw? And you say,
mm,
I don't know. I wasn't really paying attention. I don't really care that much."
mm,
It was a science fiction film, and I'm not really into science fiction. Well, if you
mm,
don't care, neither will your brain. Your brain
mm,
pays attention to things that are important to you. And so the hack
mm,
is, if you need to take in some information or make a memory out of something, you're going to need something later, find a way to make it meaningful to you. even if you have to be really
Mm,
silly and goofy.
mm,
So I need to remember something about, I need to remember to bring this pink pen with me. Well, who cares about a pink pen? But let's say
mhm,
I have to have it for some reason. Well, maybe I think, okay, well, how is this meaningful to me? Well, I don't care about it, but I know that my mom's favorite color is pink. And she really, really loves
mhm,
pink roses. And so I send her pink roses every Mother's Day
mhm,
because I know she'll like them. And so this pen might not matter
mhm,
to me, but the minute I link it to my mom matters to me and she's important. So if I think of
mhm,
mom and pink pen together, I'm going to be more likely to remember this
mhm,
because now I've made it
mhm,
meaningful to me. So
mhm.
anything you can do, even if you have to make 6 leaps to make it meaningful to you, that's okay. Number 3 is related to that, and that is your brain is selfish. There's actually an area of your
Mhm,
brain that responds selectively to information about you. So if you need to be focusing on something or remember something or think about something,
mhm,
and you want to make sure that it's going to be done in a way where you're going to remember it later, you're going to have it to recall on later, make it meaningful to you. And so think about how that's important to you. Me, 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 me. Your brain is all about me, me,
mhm,
me.
mhm.
That's a hack right away, also.
Mhm,
And number 4, ooh, what should number 4 be? If you wanna remember or think about a number of things, so maybe I need pen, I need phone, I need, my ID,
mhm,
and those things don't seem to go together, make them go
mhm,
together.
mhm,
So as we talked about, your brain works
mm,
based on association. So maybe I think about a way to make these things go together. And maybe that is,
mm,
I think about what would happen if I took my pen and started writing on my phone? How disastrous would that be? And then what
mhm,
if I took that pen and also started writing on my ID? I wouldn't be able to go anywhere. I wouldn't be able to take a flight. Your
mhm,
security would
mhm,
tell me, forget about it.
mhm,
So maybe the solution is I actually get one of those wallets where I can put my ID on the back of my phone.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I take the pen and I throw the pen across the room because I don't want it to be anywhere
mhm,
near my phone and my ID.
mhm.
So
And it sticks.
yeah,
Mm,
when you take things that don't necessarily go together and you create a story to force them to go together,
mhm.
your brain remembers it better and your brain can think about it in a more
Great.
complex and deep way. And in fact, number 5 would just be, let's take advantage of that. Let's take advantage of the fact that your brain is a storyteller and your brain likes to have a lot of information about something. And you can drop something into your brain, and then what if we just let your brain go on fire with it? So I want you to think about an apple. And you're just, maybe you're just thinking
Mhm,
about an apple. Now, think about the difference between that. And if I
mhm,
say to you, Marcus, I want you to think about an apple, but rather than just an apple, I want you to actually create an image of it and think about what it looks like. Now,
mhm,
think about the heft of that apple in your hand. Think about the weight
mhm,
of it and how weighty it is. Now, take a look at that apple. Now imagine
mhm,
looking at its shiny green texture. Maybe it's a Granny Smith apple, like the kind they use
mhm,
in apple pie.
mhm,
And you can see it's
mhm,
shiny and green. It has kind of a waxy look to it almost. It's so shiny. Now I'm going to take that apple and I'm going to take a bite out of it. Now imagine the tart,
mhm,
sweet taste of the apple. And it's so
mm.
juicy that a little juice runs out of your mouth and dribbles out of your chin. That's an apple. So when we've done that,
Exactly. I wanna have it right now.
me too, I might be salivating a little bit. I should keep apples handy when I talk to people. So what that does, instead of just thinking of an apple, which really would take advantage of your hippocampus and your frontal cortex, now you've engaged your occipital lobe and created imagery. You've thought about what it looked like. You've engaged somatosensory cortices, kind of on the top and side of your brain. You thought about what it's going to feel like. what it's going to taste like, the sound of that crunch as you bite into the apple. And so you've created, instead of just two parts of your brain, several parts of your brain. So maybe now,
Wow.
instead of 20,000 neurons talking about your apple, you have 100,000 neurons, 200,000 neurons about your
Mm,
apple.
mm,
And that means you have a much better chance of recalling that apple or thinking about that apple later on.
brilliant. You already mentioned, Heather, that you would go to space, maybe not to Mars, maybe to the moon at some point. I'm asking because I'm asking this question to each of my guests. And the question is, for that long journey, because going into space may be exciting, but traveling can get pretty boring at some point. And what's the one tune, what's the one piece of music you would want to bring on that trip on your playlist? Because we have that playlist on Spotify. There's a playlist we called the playlist for the aspiring space traveler. What's your tune you want to introduce to that
One
playlist?
tune, one song. That's it. I
Exactly.
would choose Jump by Madonna. And the reason for that is
Fantastic.
uh,
Hmm.
I'm a huge
Hmm.
Madonna fan. So
Mm.
love Madonna, love her music. To me, her music's very inspiring. And what I love about this song, Jump, is that it has a really good beat to it. It's a good dance tune. So that would keep me upbeat, keep me moving, keep me in the mood. And we know that that movement and beat and things like that are all very, very positive cues for your brain to induce joy and to induce well-being. So it would definitely be a song that can induce well-being and joy. And then also, that song is all about moving to the next place. There's only so
Mm.
much I can do in one place. The more that I wait, the more time that
Mm.
I waste. And for me, that song
Mm.
has always
Mm.
been what helps propel me from one stage to the next stage, from one place to the next place, from
Beautiful.
here now to wherever I'm going in the future. And what better message to
Beautiful.
have on a space flight than a song that's about jumping to the next place?
You got a special relationship with Madonna. Do you mind sharing that story?
Sure. As I've stated, I am a huge Madonna fan, and my husband and I always go to multiple shows whenever she's on tour because her message and her performance and her her life is just so inspirational to me and makes me feel like $1,000,000 when I'm at her concerts. And that feeling was
Mhm.
amplified one time many years ago. I was unexpectedly pulled up on stage to dance with her and appear with her.
On stage with her.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I mean, like, how does that happen? I mean, like, what are the odds?
The odds are very, very slim. I will say that my personal journey with Madonna has included that for me to get into the concerts, I go in costume. So I made a costume from my one of my favorite tours, the Confessions tour. And when I was doing my PhD, this was my therapy. I would work on my dissertation and then come home at night and make myself this costume. And I grew up as a dancer, tap, jazz, ballet, Hawaiian, Tahitian. I
Hmm.
was in a modern company for 2 years in college. And so the
Hmm.
idea of a dance costume was something that spoke to me. And this costume is
Hmm.
from the tour. Then it has the album that jump song is on, the Confessions tour, the Confessions album. And it's a white unitard with purple stripes and 6-inch platform go-go boots and a white cape that says Dancing Queen on the back and has reflective glitter disco balls on the inside. And
Wow.
another special thing about this costume is that it's actually a throwback to an ABBA costume. And in this particular tour, she actually received permission and
Mm.
was sampling an ABBA song, which ABBA doesn't do that very often. So this was very special.
Mm.
So I
Mm.
began to go to the concerts in this costume, and it really just helped me immerse myself in the show and be one with the show. And I was in this costume and was able to actually meet the costume designer years later who designed that costume, which was a very special moment to me.
Mhm.
And the show at that concert was almost all the way done. And so we were almost all the way done, nearing the finish line. And all of a sudden, I get a tap on the shoulder. And it was tap going 10 people in because I was in the middle of the row and I had to turn out and look. And they said, somebody
Mm-hmm.
wants to talk to you. And I went out into the aisle and there was a very, very stern, large security man there and another man with a headset on who was very technologically inclined with the show.
Dark shades.
And he said, do you want to go on stage with Madonna? It, as if there's any answer but yes. Of course the answer is yes. And they
Wow.
said,
Wow.
okay, we're going to take you up to the side of the stage. And in about 2 minutes, that'll happen. And we don't know what's going to happen.
Wow.
And she pulled me on stage. She began dancing. And as a dancer myself, I followed what she was doing and did the same dance moves and just played along with everything she was doing. And I knew it was the
Wow.
culmination of all of my experiences. It was my dance experience taking into place and my love of performing and public speaking took place because I wasn't afraid to be on stage in front of 18,000 people I didn't know. Thought that was
Wow.
super exciting. And it was also my background in neuroscience taking place because I thought, okay, this could go very, very well, or this could go horribly wrong. I could end up just
Yes.
falling flat on my face in my go-go boots on stage in front of everybody. And that would be a
Uh,
disaster.
how did you hack your own mind? How did
So
you
I
hack your own
hacked
mind?
my own mind a few ways. One is that I had a lot of cortisol, that stress hormone floating around my system because I thought, this is happening? And I was in shock. And so I did a few deep breathing exercise. And I did a
Mm-hmm.
few little dance warm up moves to get my body ready and to get the idea of motion
Mm-hmm.
happening in my body. And then I also thought about who is Madonna? What does Madonna stand for? What does she value? What does she respect? And she does not suffer fools. She respects people who are bold, people who take risks and take chances, and people who she can banter with. She's very, very funny
Mm-hmm.
and very witty, and she has an amazing brain and wit about
Mm-hmm.
her. And so I thought, I have to be bold, I have to be brave, I have to dive in and take risks and do whatever this experience puts in front of me and make the most of it. And if she talks to me, I have to be witty and I have to show
Mm-hmm.
that I can respond to her. And that's exactly what I did.
Mm-hmm.
And it was an amazing, life-changing experience. It was the culmination of all
Wow.
of my skills coming together at once for a really amazing moment. And of course, we went back for more concerts after that.
Wow. What a fantastic story. I'm so happy for you. Beautiful. Um, I challenge you now to energize the audience with an espresso for the mind, to an inspiring, energizing thought you'd like to share with me. And it can be whatever kind of topic you wanna pick.
Yeah,
What would it
I
be?
have something that's amazing that comes back to one of the first things we talked about when you asked, is it true we only use 10% of our brains? And we said no. And in
Mm.
fact, here's a really, really cool thing. We don't even know what the capacity of the human brain is. We don't know what the capacity of the human mind is
Mm.
because it's never been reached. So it might be that your brain's capacity is limitless. And with that in mind,
Oh.
when you think about your brain's capacity to be limitless, think about everything you want to do. Think about what you want to do to make your life a little happier, a little more joyful, a little more positive, maybe a little more productive, maybe reach those goals you want to reach. You can do it. Your brain can do it. It can absolutely do it. You have the capability. And one of the best ways to get there is to engage your curiosity because your brain likes to solve problems and riddles and challenges. And when you
Mm.
use curiosity, that just means you're asking questions about things. How can I get there? What's next? What would happen if I did this? If I do X, do I think Y will happen or will Z happen? And by engaging that
Mm.
curiosity, you're opening up your brain to outside possibilities. And you're essentially feeding your brain good information about the possibilities. And so this is why I
Wow.
tell people whenever you can, take the opportunity to tap in and unlock your super brain.
Wow. Thank you so much. This is usually the cue that this is now the end of our recording, but I would like to share something, an observation that I'm making about my own mind with you, with the audience. It may be nothing new to you, but there's this technique called speed writing. And I do it quite a bit when I'm stuck in a problem or when I need ideas, whatever. So I would sit down, set a timer to 5 minutes, and force my rational mind to get quiet by stressing it through that timer. And so I'm writing against the clock, and it's not about anything in particular I'm writing. I'm just spilling subconscious ideas onto a piece of paper in no meaningful way whatsoever. But this usually produces very interesting insights into problems or questions I may have, or I even not aware of I'm having. And so this is a very interesting and useful technique for myself when I'm stuck with something. I guess this is nothing new to
I
you.
love it. I think that's fantastic. The challenge with being a human is that we have these very large frontal lobes right here, and they're really good at getting
Mm,
deep into thought. And as you've noted, sometimes when we get deep into thought, it actually harms our productivity, and we can get stuck and we
mm,
can get in a rut. And putting a challenge on yourself is a really good way to escape that. So that 5 minutes of writing,
mm,
brilliant. I love it. I do something similar sometimes with speaking, even. So rather than
mm,
writing fast without thinking, I speak fast without thinking. And I'll turn on my phone and record and give myself one topic and 2 minutes and see what comes out. And very often it's not something I'd thought
mm.
about before. So this is a fantastic way to hack your brain, to gain new insights, and really to focus on what the important thing is you're trying to say that you might not have even been aware of next time, or you weren't sure how to distill this complicated thing. When you give yourself a time limit and you force yourself to write or talk about it, the important parts shine through. They're in your brain. Your brain knows them. This is just a way to unlock it.
Yes, Heather Collins, this is mind-blowingly interesting. Thank you so much for taking the time and be a guest on the
Oh,
show.
happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me, Marcus. This has been such a fun and interesting and intellectually stimulating discussion. And this was an absolute wonderful experience. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for being on the show with us, for spending the past 60 minutes with us. And I'm hoping that you're taking some benefit from what you've heard today. At least I did. I'm going to try out some of those exercises Heather recommended us do. So I would totally love to hear what you're making of them. So please do drop us a message wherever you find the Space Cafe podcast. In the show notes, there's a bunch of links where to find us. So if you found this episode beneficial to you, consider recommending it to a friend or two who may have some interest in the topics that we're discussing here on the Space Cafe podcast. I'm really looking forward to welcoming you again in 2 weeks from now, and thanks for your loyalty. This means a lot to us. Please don't forget to give us a rating or two or a review on your favorite podcast platforms. The most important ones are Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So if you find the time, it's, 10 seconds, please do so. It means the world to us, to me, for the Space Cafe podcast. Thank you for listening. Talk to you in 2 weeks from now. Bye-bye.